Hey guys, welcome to the Punk Rock Condition, where we explore, discover, and appreciate all things punk rock. If that interests you, please subscribe. Here on today's episode, we're doing episode 2 of PRC Perspectives, where I raise a question and attempt to answer it. And today I'm asking, did we have it better in the 90s? Meaning my generation, people who grew up in the 90s. And it's much more specific than did we have it better. I'm talking about what it was like to acquire and absorb music and to appreciate live music and what that did for you as a person and how it shaped your identity. I could go on all day about how great the pop culture stuff was and how many things I fell in love with in the 90s and how I don't think that there's an opposite number here in 20s. But that there's no point in that. Yes, Quentin Tarantino was great, and South Park, and Seinfeld, and this, and that, and Beavis and Butthead, and MTV, and Pixar, and what all the best bands that we all love, what they did in the 90s, what Green Day and Offspring did breaking down the door, all the great records that were put out by all of our favorite bands, and Bad Religion, and Lagwagon, and NoFX, and Pennywise, and all that great stuff. But what I'm getting at is when I was a teenager, okay, you just couldn't have everything that you wanted anytime you wanted it. And so if your argument is about convenience and accessibility, then the conversation stops there. There's no comparing how convenient everything is today and how accessible everybody's discography from the history of music is. And if that's what you like, the convenience and the accessibility, then the conversation or the argument stops there. But I'd like to point out a couple of things as to why I think it was better to grow up that way, because I've had it both ways. I had it, before cell phones, and now I've got everything at the world at my fingertips. And when I was a teenager, CDs were like $20 in the 90s. When you went and bought a CD, it was like, yo, I gotta make sure that I'm making an investment here. And even if you took a CD home and didn't like it, you fucking listened to it over and over and over and got the most out of it that you could. But I had this giant collection of tapes, right? Like cassette tapes. You'd make deals with your buddies where you'd be like, yo, you buy a CD, I'll buy a CD, tape it for each other, whatever. So the quickest, the cheapest way to get stuff from people was to tape it. So I had all these tapes, right? And you would make friends with people who had decent CD collections so that you could swap it with each other. And it forged friendships and relationships. And, it was difficult to get music and to get it into your pocket and to listen to it. There were so many bands I wanted to listen to that I couldn't. So many bands that I couldn't listen to because I just couldn't get a hold of it, or I couldn't afford it, or both. And so what you had that was your own was a part of you. And you were on this never-ending mission to try and get a hold of more music. And so it just created this identity, this thing that was going on between you and the music, this relationship that existed that was so important. And I just can't imagine that kids today have that going on when all you need is a Spotify or an Apple Music or Amazon Music subscription to get a hold of anything you want. In the 90s, when you went to a show, you had to show up on time because to watch every opening band in the hopes that they were going to kick ass and that you were going to buy their CD. There was nothing better than going to see a show and not necessarily knowing who was opening and checking them out and digging it and buying the CD and then being like, yo, I remember when I got into that band. I remember when that happened. It was awesome. I went and saw them. They kicked ass, blah, blah, blah. I made the decision that they kicked ass in real time and then went and bought that CD. And so you had this, I made up my mind thing about it forever. And so, it just led to such a concrete idea of who you were because you knew what you did to acquire this stuff. And then, because record labels were such a big deal back then, you would open that booklet, man, and you would see every band that band thanked and immediately want to listen to them and start thinking about them and be like, oh yeah, I bought that, whoever CD and they thanked so-and-so and I don't know who they are, but I got to figure it out, or do you know who they are, or so on and so forth. And so it was like cultivating a lifelong interest in something. And so, a couple of years ago I was saying to people how great the 90s were and how it had this feel and how it went across all media platforms, whether it be TV or movies, or there just seemed to be, or music, there seemed to be this creative fertile ground that was going on anywhere you looked. Something was cool that was going on. And I remember thinking to myself when I was a kid, like, yo, the 60s were cool, weren't they? I would have been cool to grow up in the 60s. And I felt like collectively, like the people in the 90s were like a little too young to be able to appreciate what had gone on in the 60s. It had taken 30 years for that to all happen and then wear off and then have a generation be like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And the 60s were cool, but this is our thing. It's our time to do something entirely new. And we did. And so like I was saying to people, you know what? The 2020s, these kids are going to look at the 90s and go, yeah, that was cool as shit. But you're old. We're doing our thing. And it just doesn't appear to be happening that way. And I think because the variable that has changed is the accessibility and the availability and the technological advances and the phone and everything. And it's creating a generation of, I don't know, it just feels amorphous. It doesn't feel like it has its own thing. And I want it to. I want to be my age looking at what's going on and going like, yeah, okay, I'm a little bit older than it. It's not happening to me in my formative years. But I can look at it and go, this is unique and special and cool. Like I would imagine 40-year-olds felt about what was happening in the 90s if they were keen, if they got it. If they were stiff, they're a stiff. Who cares what they were thinking anyway? But I always wanted that. And maybe it'll still happen. The decade's not over. But, the relationships that you built with people, like-minded people in the 90s, especially if you were doing something counterculture like getting into punk rock, man, it just felt like you were doing something that was all yours. Because you were. To a degree, your version of that, you acquired it all on your own. From having this interest that you couldn't get enough of it. Everywhere you turned around, you were trying to be like, does anybody have anything I can see or listen to or this or that? Because I'm dying to get my hands on anything that I can. And so, there was also, when you went to a show, I talked about going to see the openers, but there was a magic to being at the show. There was no like flipping your phone up and taking a picture or a video of what's going on. And I do that now. I do it now. I'm guilty of it. But you went to a show and it just was like, yo, this is only happening here and it's only happening once. And if you missed it, you missed it. So the experience itself was so goddamn special. You had to commit it to memory. I remember, I would never get into any shenanigans when it came to going to shows. It wasn't time to screw off or try and steal a 6-pack of beer or get stoned or whatever and go to the show. I was like, fuck that, we could do it afterwards. But I'm here to see this show. If I can't tell you what songs they played, or if I can't remember what songs they played or what the performance was like, then whatever. My account of it in my own head is more important than anything else. And so between the acquisition of music, the relationships you built doing it, and the unique special feeling that you got in going to a show and discovering new music on your own, or just rocking out with one of your favorite bands and not being able to look at it the next day or ever again, it just made my love for it all so deep-seated that here I am sitting around talking about it 30 years later going, yo, wasn't that awesome? And doesn't it suck that there's not a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old sitting there right now about to do the same thing, to be able to fall in love with this stuff in the same way that I did? So I do not think, yeah, we had it better, you know, like old guy looking down at the younger generation. What I'm saying is that it's a point to ponder. It's a point to ponder for anybody watching this, if you've got kids, to try and give them a balance between what we had and what they have. Because I think it's what's best for everyone. So I'll close with this. There's a famous quote I want to read, and it was from John F. Kennedy. And he said, "If art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him." And there used to be money in music. Enough money that these artists could legitimately pursue it and have a living, right? I'm not talking about the bands that cracked it big. There'll always be big money in big success. But just underneath that, are these artists still being able to pursue their art enough to actually get good, to actually get great? Or are they stymied by the fact that they could get great, but Christ, there's no money in it because of the way we acquire it now, how easy it is to get? And how much are we all suffering because the artists, they're not set free to do what they need to do? And so I just think that, you know, how many musicians, how many great songs, how many great bands were out there that said, hey, I would keep doing it, but can't make any damn money. So I don't know. What do you think? Did we have it better in the 90s, or is it better today? I'm going to lean ever so slightly on the side of we had it better. We did. And I'm just talking about the music side of it and how we got it and all that stuff. That's all I'm talking about. So let me know what you think. Did we? Did we have it better in the 90s, or do you have it better today? All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate it. See you guys on the next one.